Howdy, hello, Dr. G here. In this lecture, we're going to be talking about the U.S. regional cuisine of the Midwest. So, the first two lectures, we talked about subregions, the New England and Mid-Atlantic, but in this lecture, we're going to be talking about all of the Midwest. There will be a few times where I'll talk about West North Central versus East North Central, but just know that it's these blue states here that we're going to be talking about. The issues or the hopefully what you will remember about this area is one, we have the Great Lakes over here. It's kind of hard to see because it's broken up based on the way the map is set up, but the Great Lakes are part of the Midwest. And we also see that these are the plains, the Great Plains, when we talk about Native Americans. And plains means agriculture. Plains means opportunity for growth as far as growing lots of great crops. It is called the breadbasket. The Great Plains region is called the breadbasket because there's lots of agriculture, particularly wheat, but you can see corn, anything being grown here. So here's my picture to show you big agriculture, not just small farms. Germans and Scandinavians you can see huge pockets of them that were transplanted into the Midwest. I think I mentioned this when we were talking about the regions, Germany and Scandinavia before, but my best friend is from North Dakota, which is considered part of the Midwest, and she lives North Dakota-Minnesota border, and the influences of Scandinavians and Germans and Eastern Europeans is clearly evident in their ways and what they look like. Honestly, that they have many of them have very, very fair hair, fair-skinned from the Scandinavian regions, and they have a unique way of talking. Even though they're speaking English, it's still certainly got the accent from particularly the Scandinavian roots. So fun little bit. Hopefully one day I'll get a video for you guys about my best friend Brenna and all the awesome food that we can consume there. But I will definitely say that the cuisine is considered no-frills farm food. That what that means is particularly in the more rural areas, people eat what they grow, or at grocery stores they may have limited capacity. This was a while ago now, but when I went to visit North Dakota, my friend lives out in a very rural part of North Dakota because her husband is a farmer, and the stores, you would have to drive a great distance to get to the store, but the local stores, maybe the corner store kind of thing, they had canned goods and stuff like that, but as far as fresh fruits and vegetables, there wasn't a whole lot there. So we live in Raleigh and we have so many restaurants and things coming around that I have access to any kind of food basically that I want. Well, some of you may have even experienced that where you grew up, or even where you live now, and that no frills certainly plays into the Midwest kind of thing. Another fun little story that some of you may relate to, that a woman was a restaurant reviewer for North Dakota, made huge waves a few years ago because a new restaurant came into town and she called it like the best Italian food she'd ever tried, and it's just amazing cuisine. And it's the Olive Garden. And again, for somebody who has never gone to a non-Americanized Italian restaurant, Olive Garden's great. But she got slammed. It is just interesting. She got a lot of publicity. First, she got slammed from people who were like, Olive Garden, are you kidding me? But then once people got to know where she lived and what was available there, they realized, oh, well, yeah, Olive Garden is the best new thing in town. And I will say hospitality is absolutely valued. Where we have potlucks and social events here in the southern region, if you've been around very much, the Midwest, it's even more so, especially, like I said, my experience from the North Dakota, Minnesota side of things. People are just so hospitable and so welcoming, and they want to feed you and love on you and everything else. So that's part of the Midwest. So then when we look at what is their cuisine like, we see meat and potatoes, which this is pretty fancy meat and potatoes for them. That's a steak there, but you'll see meat and potatoes with a side dish of vegetables. But certainly still today, meat and potatoes are the staple, like, here's what is going to take up most of my plate. Homemade breads or fresh breads are very common, that partly because you have such easy access to the grains. Soups and stews are important, particularly from a cooking, or not cooking, but of course it's cooking, but from a preparation standpoint, thinking about if you're out in the field long periods of times, you want to be able to come in and just eat. And also in the winter time in particular, the winters are brutal in the Midwest, and so that's something that you want to pay attention to. And here's one of those sub-region kind of things that I want to point out, that in the west north central sub-region, you'll see wild rice is a very important crop there. I don't know if you can hear that purring, but my cat just decided to come walk on the computer. I apologize for that. But I'll show you a video about wild rice and the importance of wild rice versus agricultural rice in a minute. So we also have the ideas of preparation methods with meats and other things. So canning and preserving are still very common in the Midwest, and of course they were necessary because I just talked about the brutal winters, that nothing grows up there in the wintertime. Nothing. And basically you ice fish. Seriously, I'm not kidding. They ice fish. And you just do so much sitting around that there's not a whole lot to go outside because it's so cold. So you have to make sure that you have enough food. And certainly, again, now that there are grocery stores and stuff, it's a lot easier to get access to food, but still the old ways and farming and stuff that you'll see. Sausages are very common. That's a German influence, right? In jerky was an adaptation of the Native American pemmican, right? We learned a little bit about that in last unit, but jerky, beef jerky in particular, I've got some beef jerky here, it's just dried meat that's been seasoned. Cheese, huge dairy influence. We see that with the Scandinavians coming over in particular, that cheeses are huge, and I liked this one. I love my cheese curds. I should have shown you a picture of me wearing my cheese head. Huge Packers fan here. But the football kind of thing, those of you who don't know who the Packers are, I'm sorry. But cheese is a huge part of the Midwest culture, that fresh cheese and all different types, just amazing. And if you do get to go to the Midwest and get to try cheese curds, please make sure that you ask for the squeakiest ones they've got, because squeaky means it's fresh. And we also have processed food. So many of the industry folks these days, Kraft, Oscar Mayer, and Kellogg, they began their roots in the Midwest. As I've said already, you have a lot of German, Eastern European influence on the Midwest and some common dishes. So horseradish, this spicy kind of condiment. But sausages, we've already mentioned, are common. Sauerkraut, so pickled cabbage, pickled vegetables. Pierogies, from Polish pierogi right here. So it's like a dumpling, right? Then we have a strudel. So this is an apple strudel. You can see that it's a pastry that it most often has this beautiful braided look to it and has layers of, in this case, apples, but layers of fruit inside. We talked about Spätzle already in Hassenpfeffer. Hopefully you remember Hassenpfeffer from the Bugs Bunny thing. So those are two things that we've already talked about from Germany that are a huge influence in the Midwest. And of course, you can't get away from the Midwest without talking about sweets and beer. They don't necessarily go hand in hand, but the Midwest loves their sweets, loves all sorts of sweets, whether it be what you would call baked goods or just cookies and things like that. But Kuchen is common in Wisconsin, and it's basically what we would call a coffee cake that's got from the German influence there, buttermilk pies and cakes. And then we have kolaches, which I told you about my favorite town in Texas, West Texas, that is a Czech town, and amazing kolaches there. But this is what a kolache is. It's just a yeast roll that has a fruit filling. Sometimes you'll have cheese and things like that, but some kind of a fruit pie filling in the middle, and it's just delicious. And of course, I've talked before about beer, but beer is certainly plays a large role in the Midwest, that we saw and still do see a lot of breweries in that area. And I think I mentioned before the Laverne and Shirley, go watch some old school TV, and Laverne and Shirley were set in the Midwest, right? That they worked at a brewery. So that wraps it up. Hopefully you get an understanding of the cultural influences of Midwest regional cuisine, particularly looking at Scandinavian, Eastern European, the German influences. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to help.